Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For many years, I have been fascinated by a question. Why are some people genuinely happy, while others, despite possessing many of the things they once believed would make them happy, remain dissatisfied? It is an interesting thing. A man may spend years pursuing success, believing that happiness waits somewhere in the future. He tells himself, "I'll be happy when I earn more money. I'll be happy when I reach my goal. I'll be happy when circumstances improve." And yet, when he arrives at the place he once longed for, the feeling often doesn't last. The satisfaction fades. A new goal appears. And once again, happiness seems to be somewhere further down the road. Why does this happen? Because happiness was never meant to be a destination. It was meant to be a companion that walks beside us when we are moving towards something worthwhile. If you study the happiest people you know, you will notice something. They are not always the wealthiest, they are not always the most fortunate, and they certainly do not live lives free from difficulty. But they are moving forward, they are growing, they are learning, they are working towards something that matters to them, and perhaps that is one of the great secrets of a good life. Human beings seem to be happiest not when they arrive, but when they are making progress toward a worthy goal. And that is what I would like us to think about together today. Why progress, more than possessions, achievements, or circumstances, may be the true source of lasting happiness. The arrival fallacy and why it disappoints. It's a curious thing about the way the human mind works. We are remarkably good at imagining how a future condition will feel. A man who has never owned a fine home can picture, with considerable clarity, the satisfaction he will feel when he does. A woman who has worked toward a particular position can describe, in some detail, the sense of accomplishment that will come when she reaches it. And this imagination, this ability to picture the reward ahead of us, is not a weakness. It is what drives us forward through difficulty. It is the engine of ambition. Without it, very little would get built or written or discovered. The trouble is that the imagination consistently overestimates the lasting power of what we are picturing. We arrive. We feel the satisfaction, genuinely, for a day, a week, perhaps a month. And then the feeling fades and the horizon shifts, and we are back at the same place we were before, looking toward the next thing that will, we tell ourselves, finally do it. I knew a man in business, a capable fellow, genuinely hard-working, who spent the better part of 15 years working toward a particular level of financial independence. He had a specific number in his mind. When he reached it, he told me, he would feel settled, content, at ease in a way he never had been. He reached it. I saw him about a year afterward. He was not at ease. He was working toward a new number, larger, naturally, with the same urgency he had brought to the first one. When I asked him about it, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that I have thought about ever since. He said, "I think I was happier when I was getting there than I've been since I arrived." He had noticed something true, but he hadn't yet understood what it was telling him. What it was telling him was this: the happiness he experienced on the way to his goal was not incidental to the goal. It was not a byproduct of approaching success. It was, in fact, the real thing. The daily sense of movement, of working towards something defined and meaningful, was the happiness itself. And the moment the movement stopped, the happiness stopped with it. He had been treating the destination as the point. The destination was never the point. The direction was the point. What progress actually does to a person. A man can be extraordinarily busy, occupied from morning until night with 100 different tasks, and feel, at the end of the week, no sense of progress at all. Busyness and progress are not the same thing. In fact, busyness is often what we use to avoid confronting whether we are actually making progress toward anything that matters. I mean deliberate, directed movement toward a goal that the person has chosen because it reflects something they genuinely value, That kind of progress does something specific to the human being who experiences it. The first thing it does is provide a frame for difficulty. Every life contains difficulty. The question is not whether a person will encounter it, but how they will interpret it when it arrives. And the person who is making genuine progress toward a meaningful goal has a frame for difficulty that the person without direction does not have. The difficulty is not an interruption. It is part of the work. It is the resistance that the progress is being made against. And resistance, understood that way, does not demoralize. It confirms that something real is being attempted. A farmer understands this. He does not expect the soil to cooperate. He expects to work the soil, to contend with it season after season, and to produce from it something that would not have been there without his effort. The difficulty is not evidence that farming is the wrong occupation. It is farming. Progress, similarly, is made against resistance, and the man who understands this meets difficulty differently from the man who expects the road to be smooth. The second thing progress does is provide a reliable source of self-respect. Self-respect is not, as it is sometimes described, a feeling we generate about ourselves independent of what we actually do. It is earned. It is the quiet acknowledgement, made privately and without fanfare, that we are doing what we set out to do, that we are keeping faith with the person we intended to be. A man who is making genuine progress, who ends most days having moved, however incrementally, in the direction he has chosen, carries a kind of interior steadiness that other people notice without quite being able to name. It is not arrogance. It is simply the settled quality of a person who has no reason to be at war with themselves. And a man who is not making progress, who has been meaning to begin for months, who has the intention but not the action, carries a different kind of interior weather, a low-grade restlessness. A dissatisfaction that has no single source because it comes from everywhere. It comes from the accumulated weight of the gap between what he intended to do and what he is actually doing. That weight is real, and no external success, no increase in salary, no improvement in circumstances lifts it, because it was not put there by external conditions. It was put there by the person themselves, and only the person themselves can lift it by beginning to move. The worthy goal, and why it matters which one you choose. Not all goals produce the same experience when pursued. A man who spends 5 years working toward a goal that was never really his, that he adopted because the people around him seemed to expect it, or because it appeared impressive from a distance, will not experience the same quality of forward movement as a man who is working towards something he genuinely cares about. The first man's progress is technically real. He is moving toward the target he named, but somewhere underneath it, he knows the target was chosen without much honest examination, and that knowledge quietly undermines the satisfaction that the movement might otherwise produce. This is why so many people arrive at ostensibly successful positions and feel less satisfied than they expected. Not because achievement is overrated, it is not, but because the achievement was in service of goals they had never seriously chosen. I think of Abraham Lincoln in this regard. Lincoln was a man who failed at numerous endeavors across the first half of his life, business ventures that collapsed, electoral defeats, setbacks that would have finished the ambitions of a less determined man. And through all of it, he kept working. Not frantically, not without doubt, but consistently. What sustained him through those years was not the confidence that he would succeed. It was the clarity of what he cared about, the law, the idea of representative government, the question of whether a nation built on certain principles could survive. These were not goals assigned to him by others. They were his, honestly arrived at, and he pursued them with the kind of steadiness that only genuine conviction produces. The happiness Lincoln experienced, and the accounts suggest he did experience genuine satisfaction in the work, even through the considerable suffering of his later years, came from the alignment between what he valued and what he spent his days doing. That alignment is the goal worth working toward. Not a specific achievement, not a particular number or title, but the condition of spending your hours in honest service of what you actually believe in. So the question is, did you choose it? Or did it arrive by default, through the expectations of others, through habit, through the general current of your circumstances? A goal you chose, honestly and with clear eyes, will sustain you through the difficulty of pursuing it. A goal that arrived by default will feel increasingly hollow the closer you get to it. The difference matters more than almost anything else in the construction of a satisfying life. How to keep progress alive across a lifetime. How does a person maintain progress, genuine, directed, meaningful progress, not just for a month or a year, but across the full span of an active life? The honest answer is that it requires a kind of discipline. It requires the regular practice of keeping the goal visible. A goal that is defined once and then filed away, kept somewhere in the back of a person's thinking but never brought forward for regular examination, loses its power to direct behavior. The demands of the ordinary day are persistent and immediate. They fill the available space, and a goal that exists only in the abstract cannot compete with the concrete pressure of whatever is happening right now. The person who keeps their goal alive, who returns to it regularly, who measures their recent actions against it honestly, who asks themselves with some frequency whether the week they just lived moved them toward or away from what they intend, that person maintains the quality of directed movement that produces satisfaction. I have found across many years of observation that successful men and women in almost every field share this habit. They know what they are working toward, they think about it regularly, and they use that knowledge as a filter when deciding how to spend their time. The second requirement for lasting progress is this: the goal must be renewable. By this I mean that a person who reaches one meaningful goal must be ready, in fact, must have prepared, to commit to the next one. Not frantically, not out of the restlessness that comes from never being satisfied, but deliberately. With the understanding that forward movement is the condition they are trying to maintain, not a particular destination they are trying to reach. The man who retires without anything to retire to, without new work, new learning, new contribution, tends to age faster than the man who has simply changed the nature of his forward movement. This is not a coincidence. It reflects something true about the relationship between directed effort and vitality. When the effort stops, something essential stops with it. Winston Churchill understood this. He was nearly 70 when he became Prime Minister of Great Britain for the second time. He had, at that point, already lived what most would consider several complete careers: soldier, war correspondent, author, statesman. What kept him was not stubbornness, it was the quality of a man who always had something meaningful to move toward. When one chapter closed, another opened. The goal changes, the direction changes, but the forward movement, the fundamental orientation of a person toward something worth doing, that does not have to end. And the third thing, perhaps the most important of all for the person sitting with this right now, start where you are. Not where you intended to be by now, not where the circumstances were more favorable, where you are. The progress that produces happiness does not require ideal conditions. It requires movement, and movement in whatever direction matters to you, in whatever degree is presently possible, is available to almost anyone who decides to make it. A man who takes one step today in the direction he intends has done something real. Tomorrow, he can take another. The steps accumulate, and the accumulation, looked back on from some distance, is the life. So, the happiest people are not the ones who have arrived. They are the ones who are moving, who have found something worth working toward, chosen it honestly, and committed to the daily discipline of moving in its direction. They are not free from difficulty. They are not free from disappointment or loss, or the ordinary frustrations of a life being lived. But those things land differently for them. They are setbacks within a direction, not arguments against the direction. Happiness, understood this way, is not something you find at the end of the road. It is something you carry with you when you are on the right road, and the moment you stop moving on it, the happiness stops too. So the question I want to leave with you today is a simple one. Are you moving? Not in the frantic, scattered way of a person who is simply busy, but in the deliberate, directed way of a person who knows where they are going and why. If the answer is yes, if you can feel the satisfaction of genuine forward movement in your work, or your relationships, or your own continued growth, then what remains is simply to continue, to maintain the direction through whatever the coming season brings. And if the answer is no, if you have been standing still for longer than you care to admit, if the weeks are passing without the sense that anything is being built, then perhaps today is the day to choose a direction. Not the perfect direction, not the one that requires everything to be in order first, just a direction that is genuinely yours, one that reflects what you actually value rather than what you have drifted into. And then begin moving in it. Today. Not when the conditions improve. Today. That is where happiness lives. Not ahead of you, waiting to be reached. Beside you, while you move.